Hello, everybody, and welcome to the live stream recording of a special Young Screenwriters podcast episode. We're going to get into it in a couple of minutes, where we're going to be talking about writing the feature, writing the pilot, and doing a free little workshop about. Oh my gosh, I have YouTube open at the same time, and I started hearing myself, and I was like, "God, no."
Oh, I hate
Anyway,
when that happens. Yeah.
but anyway, yeah, we're going to be talking about protagonist-centric stories, why they're awesome, why it's something that we really believe in, and that kind of a concept more broadly, and also what you can expect if you want to enroll in one of these courses someday. Um, and yeah, the kind of the inspiration for that is that from now until April 15th, we're doing a 25% off discount, um, sort of to help everyone get ready for contest season, which is
That's right.
in full swing right now. So if you have a script that you're trying to polish up for contest season this year, good. Or if this has inspired you and you're like, man, I really want one from next year for next year, I want to submit next year, this is great too. Give yourself plenty of time. So yeah, we'll get into it in a minute. But
And just to add on that, we are putting 25% off for our two premier courses that are paid, writing the feature and writing the pilot. Writing the
yes.
feature is John Warren's NYU class in 12 weeks that just focuses on what's the equivalent of it, basically. That Alexie and I worked really hard to draw John's best sort of knowledge and really try to make quantifiable step-by-step process for every aspect of the writing process that you would get out of his course, but really streamlined in a focused way. And writing the pilot, which is a brand new course that Alexie and I have developed on writing spec pilots and kind of like how to construct stories that work really well for television and also web series or any serialized format.
I'm using it for a comic.
Hey.
So it's pretty fun. So yeah, we'll get into that in about a minute or so. We want to give folks a little bit of time to trickle in. But yeah. How are you all doing today? Did you all see the eclipse?
No, but I walked around my house like this all day because I was like, I'm gonna look out the window and I'm gonna go blind.
I didn't get
Oh
the
my
special
God.
glasses. I didn't get the special glasses, and I could have. And it's lame. I should have looked.
I didn't notice anything. Nothing happened here. So
Well, that's
Yeah.
because you need to like have the special glasses and you see it.
Yeah, you can't
Clouds
see
can
it
like.
without the glasses.
no,
Yeah.
but I mean like nothing about the sky changed.
Yeah, I know. Like, same here.
See? Ooh.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
It was really,
Wow.
really hard. It was where I am, we were not in the full path of the eclipse, but my whole family went to like Indiana to see it, and they got some like insane pictures. See?
Wow, that's crazy.
But here it was just like it got a little bit dim outside, and Carl was like, "It's here." And we went running out and tried to look at it, and we had like 45 seconds before the clouds completely covered it, but it was neat. It was pretty cool. The end is nigh, but it was pretty cool.
I didn't go blind, so I was happy about that. I was real nervous about it. I was like, I don't know. I'm just gonna be walking up the stairs and I'm gonna look out the window.
You're gonna be.
It's like when you're on like a really tall building on a balcony and you're like, well, what if I just jump off? It was that kind of like vibe.
Yeah, those
about the
fun like
eclipse all day.
impulses.
Yeah, I was like, oh, this is how I go blind. So now it's over and I'm really glad.
I will say I don't think it's like, like Superman vision where the moment you look up, it's just like your eyeballs fry.
No,
I think
it
it's
takes
more
time.
like
No, I researched
Oh.
heavily.
Sometimes it just doesn't make a difference, You still feel like you're gonna go blind. But cool. All right, let's go ahead and get into this. I'll do our little music and we'll get going. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Young Screenwriters Podcast. I'm Alexie, and I'm here today with Adam and Theo. And this is a special episode where we are going to be talking about our two premiere courses, writing the pilot and writing the feature. And we're also going to be talking about protagonist-centric stories in general and why they are awesome. So, to kind of get things rolling real quick, let's just tell you a little bit about what those courses are, and then we can kind of shift into protagonist-centric stories and why that's the approach that these go with.
Amazing.
Yeah, amazing. So yeah, so writing the feature was our first premiere course. It came out after writing the short and briefly after writing the scene. And basically, it's a 10-week course that is the equivalent of what I took at NYU. It's the advanced screenwriting course with my professor from when I was there, John Warren. He's now the head of film and TV at NYU. And Adam and I basically sat down with him for many days straight and asked him a ton of questions and got and got him to put his course on video in a way. Um, and also to go deeper because we had the opportunity to really kind of push him and ask questions about why is this happening and how does that work, and not just like the superficial, like this is what it is, but really going deeper. And it was an amazing experience for us. Um, and it's been really, really cool to share it with all of you. So that is not priced at the cost of an NYU year.
No.
But so we try really hard to keep it accessible and affordable. And so that's writing the feature. And then, Adam, do you want to explain real quick what writing the pilot is?
Yeah, writing the pilot is a course we've spent about 2 years on. Came out early last year or late last year. And writing the pilot in a similar way to writing the feature is, and in some ways, a little more challenging because there's so much more variation in what it means to be a serialized television story. Like TV shows have so much more scope, so much more time, so much more, uh, you know, you can't sort of boil it down to a formula. And if you did, you would not be helping a writer find like the best approach necessarily for their story, right? So it took us a long time to really kind of boil down what we thought were kind of some of the first principles of storytelling for television and for serialized storytelling in general. And in our experience with young screenwriters and with students, we spent a long time piloting the course, beta testing it, really getting something that we thought was nailing the actual core truths of what was important if you're trying to tell a serialized story without getting into formulas or like arbitrary guidelines that so many other television courses and so many other television teachers advocate for. Because like, for example, somebody might have been really good at writing multicam sitcoms in the 90s, but that format and that frame of storytelling was influenced by the medium of its time and the values of advertisers and the moment, right? Television has changed so much. So we were trying to find really a course that could help you write a multicam sitcom from the 90s, help you write a 1-hour prestige drama that could play on HBO, help you write something that could play on streaming, whether or not there are commercial breaks, whatever, and like writing the feature, we came at it from what we would call a protagonist-centric point of view, right? A character with a point of view who changes or doesn't change, right? But like a character who is, the eyes of the audience and whose emotional experience is the weight with which everything is judged. Sorry, that was a lot, but I
No.
really believe in both courses and I think they're really fantastic. And yeah,
Absolutely. So something
I'm
kind
biased.
of good bias. So something kind of cool is that Theo is part of our team now, but Theo actually joined us as a beta student for writing the feature way back in the day. So Theo, if you could talk a little bit about like what was your experience with writing the feature?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I was really excited about writing the feature because I had kind of just come off a string of not being able to write for a really long time. I was struggling to finish the novels that I was starting. I think because I was writing the wrong things and I was trying to push myself into stories that didn't fit me anymore. And that's what happens when you're kind of in your mid to late 20s. And when I decided to focus on my own writing again, it made sense to look into screenwriting. And so that's what I did. And I found the YouTube channel, I found Coffee Class, I found John and both of you. And it made so much sense for me to be a beta tester for writing the feature. And it was a great learning experience for me. You know, I already knew a lot of, I would say, the fundamentals of the story because that's the world that I've been in for a very long time. But I think that what the course unlocked for me was one, kind of a really practical approach at front loading the work. I had always outlined a bit, but I had not done it to the extent that we do in writing the feature. And I found the process and really analyzing each of these kind of character journeys ahead of time and figuring out the hard stuff before you get into the story, that really unlocked something for me, as well as really digging deeper into the emotional arc of the protagonist, which I think a lot of writers would really benefit from, both from the flaw in or need perspective and the objective, because that makes for a tight story. It makes for a story that is always entertaining and completely pushes either the viewer or the reader or the player, whoever is experiencing the story, forward at a consistent rate. And I think that is what sets a really great story apart from a good story.
I would agree. I think that that's totally true, and that leads us right into what we would love to talk about today, which is protagonist-centric stories and why that's the approach that these courses kind of advocate for, and also just why that's something that we believe in so much. So I guess I guess first something that might be helpful is that we define what we mean by protagonist-centric. So in features, you tend to have one core protagonist. You might have other really important characters, but the story tends to belong to one person who is making the active choices to move the story forward. It doesn't mean that you don't have an ensemble around them. It doesn't mean that other people aren't doing important things, but generally there's one person, a protagonist, who is in active pursuit of the objective, and they're the ones who undergo the strongest change. They're the ones who have the most defined and central character arc over the course of the story. And then in TV, you will almost always have multiple protagonists. You'll have a whole cast of protagonists. And even though these characters in TV, the change is not as sharp, it's not as defined, it's not as much of like a you start this way, end this way, done, because they go on for a really long time. We call it like a change slope. But generally speaking, these are the characters who, from episode to episode, will be the protagonist for that episode. They'll be leading the action for that episode, or they'll be leading a B plot in various episodes. So they're doing the same thing that a movie protagonist would do within different plots of a TV show. So when we say protagonist centric, what we mean is that this is how we kind of start looking at story. When we're looking at a feature film or when we're looking at a TV show or a series or a webcomic or whatever it is, we're really looking at first, who's this about? What do they want? And what are they doing to get it? So I want to bounce it to you all now and kind of get your thoughts on if this was the way that you always approach story, or if this was, if you didn't quite think of it this way, but you were kind of trying to get at it the whole time, or just kind of like what was your experience with this?
Well, I have a lot of opinions after having taught writing and seen a lot of writers struggle to tell stories or excel very, like seeing people try to write and seeing their writing improve. I think we all subconsciously know what a protagonist is. It's very common language, and we have an instinct to see the world through the eyes of a character, right? Like, I don't think that the problem writers have is, oh, I have to choose a character to see this story through. Usually people have a proxy character. Usually it's a version of themselves when they're really beginning, like they wrote themselves into their story, or a character who's very similar to them that can be kind of the eyes of the story. We subconsciously do this because people are story literate. We see hundreds of thousands of stories in our lifetimes, right? And we identify that subconsciously or consciously, oh, this story is about someone and it's from their point of view and they're doing things to get what they want. Now, new writers might not be able to articulate or be conscious of that. And they might get part of that in their writing in an effective way, or part of that. Not they might not be consciously using the strengths of a strong point of view, right? Like, and when beginning writers start like, okay, your protagonist has to want something. In fact, every character in your scene has to want something. They have to push the plot forward, and they have to change. And like, I think that's a very like beginner writers like are pretty good about like absorbing. Oh yeah, my character has to change. They have to want something. But going back to the courses, what the courses are great in our point of view, I think that, and John's point of view that I think is very helpful, is like, okay, you can't just be a want. It has to be something tangible, concrete, something that you have to be an objective, like that's tangible in the story. And you might ask, why is that? Why does a character have to go after something specific? Can't they just want love and like have a bunch of anecdotes and experiences that sort of they're thematically pushing towards? Well, there's something called plot in storytelling, right? The things that happen, and those things being interesting or not interesting to an audience, right? The characters interact with the plot by doing things and wanting things, right? So you could say that the choice of making the story about someone and making the plot hinge on a character in a way that is interesting and like engages people is to make that character want something and go after it in a concrete, specific way. So that's a little theoretical, but like, I think, in my journey of like learning how to write and stuff, like I always knew that stories had to be about somebody. And that was the thing I really liked. I liked in great novels having the direct thoughts of characters and those characters being interesting. And I liked walking in people's shoes, right? And I've always liked that movies can make you empathize with somebody else, right? I didn't necessarily know the best mechanism to make that interesting and to make the things that happen like worth following along, right? How to make people lean into their seats when the story starts to accelerate, and that's kind of how to write plots around characters and how to make the character active in their story, right? Like there's so many things you could describe. But yeah, Theo, what do you think?
Yeah, I think a good lead on to what you're saying is that like about having a tangible objective is that if the objective is intangible, then there can't really be great stakes, right? Like if you want love, okay, if you don't fall in love, you're not going to die, right? Like you're not going to lose your job if you don't fall in love. So having a really tangible objective gives you good stakes, and that makes people care, because if there are not stakes, if there is not something bad that is going to happen to this character, if they don't get what they are after, um then you don't feel it. You want to be on the seat of your pants. You want to be in the story. And I think a really important part about it for me, and this is something that I think takes a little bit of time, and it takes a couple screenplays, or a couple novels or whatever to figure out, is how to utilize yourself, and your life experiences in that character, right? All of us put our protagonists are us. All of our characters are us. There is no way to not do that. So don't, if anyone tells you like, oh, your character is you, don't do that. Well, no, you can't, because all of your characters are you. That's how we write. We're writing through our point of view, and you cannot write through somebody else's point of view. But I think what's important is to be able to disconnect your feelings from those characters, and make them their own, so that they can exist without you. They can make decisions that maybe you would not make. And more importantly, how you can add your life experiences, your damages, all of the terrible and wonderful things that have happened to you into your story, because that's what's going to make it interesting. You and your life is unique. Every single person's life is unique, and you can write stories that nobody else can write. And those are the interesting stories. I think a lot of people try to write stories for everyone. They think, oh, okay, people like this, so I'm going to write a story about this. When it's like, no, let's say you went to dental hygiene school, the majority of people did not go to dental hygiene school. We don't know what that's like. I'm interested in what that is. I am reading a story right now about theoretical physicists and non-theoretical physicists who are having a love to hate relationship, or the reverse of that. And I'm loving it, because I'm like, wow, I'm learning so much. I don't know this stuff. So, dig into yourself, dig into all of your experiences, because that's what's going to make your story stand out at the end of the day.
So I have a question for both of you, based kind of coming off of that. Why should people say that protagonists should be likable? Why do people say this? And is that true?
I don't think it's true.
No, I don't think it's true. But I mean,
No?
I think that the protagonist likable kind of has like a positive charge. Like, oh, like I'd
Yeah.
like to be friends with them. The protagonist has to be interesting, and you have to understand their point of view, you have to be able to see that there is something pushing them and be able to create understanding, if not empathy, for their point of view, even if you don't like them at all. So, like, if I'm watching Dexter and Dexter is a serial killer and, like, he's doing things that I don't like, I would never like Dexter the serial killer, but I understand where he's coming from and, like, I understand his point of view and I can kind of see why he's making the decisions that he's making and his choices are consistent and interesting, then I can enjoy watching him make choices without necessarily liking him. So
Some people
it's
like Dexter, though, I will
some
say.
people are messed up, but
Right.
like
We're
no.
learning that though. I think that's like a part of, our media literacy is that in days past, I think that likable protagonist is a thing that used to be true. I think you used to have to like the protagonist because we had all these morally charged things of like, oh,
Mm.
I can only enjoy something when it's a good person doing it. And then, The Sopranos kind of came along and that was not the first thing that did this, but I'm just saying in terms of whatever pop culture, watching interesting people, normal people who are mafia bosses live about their lives. That was a really big moment in television, right? Like that was a big change in how people created stories about characters. And I think that in today's landscape, we see a lot of anti-heroes. We see a lot of characters who are doing very more morally questionable things. We see a lot of gray characters, and that is becoming more and more popular. And so because of that, the idea of a likable character, I think, is a little bit passe. Like I think you want a character that people want to follow along with, whether or not they like them. They have to want to follow them. I look at something like Black Swan, right? Nina's character in Black Swan, she's obnoxious, she's incredibly insecure, but I want to watch every single thing she does because I'm captivated by her and I know she's going to make terrible choices, and I want that. Similarly, anti-hero book Yellowface, the character is pretty reprehensible, but I couldn't put the book down because I knew I trusted the author, right? I trusted the writer of the screenplay. I trust the director to know this is interesting. This is going to take me on a journey.
So
Mhm.
would you say that there's kind of like a spectrum of likable character, rooting for a character,
Rooting.
and
Mhm.
being interested enough to follow a character,
Yeah.
right? Like I've seen a spectrum of that in all these stories, right? Like, and I think when people constructed the save the cat uh,
God.
advice, which is just to define it for people, this idea that in the first 5 to 10 pages, the protagonist has to do something like save a cat out of a tree or give money to somebody or something that would make the audience want to care about them and want to think that they're a good person before the story starts, regardless of if that makes sense. Um, you know, I mean, hopefully you would make it sense if you're a good writer, but like, I think that, you guys said it exactly right. Like it used to be true. That's maybe, and it used to be something that people said was true all the time. But I think we've kind of evolved to this point where you don't have to make them likable. They can be likable, right? There's nothing wrong with a likable character, but like you have to at least empathize with them enough to be interested in what they're going to do next or care about what they're going to do next. But I like to know a lot of people, who like when Breaking Bad was at its height, you know, they were like really like wanting Walter to do really messed up stuff because they were empathizing with the character. When you
Well, and they
spend
hated
so much time,
Skylar, the one
oh yeah,
reasonable person. They hated her. She would have been like the go-to character of like 20 years before, but
oh yeah,
people
yeah, because she
hated
was
her.
because from a television show point of view, you have this character who's like you've been with struggling with all this time, and he's doing badass stuff and breaking the rules, and this is one person who's a force that is like stopping the fun of the show from the people who think it's fun to. Yeah, I think the show did a great job of really ending with no fun to kind of as a sobering, whatever reality, but it was fun for a lot of people to watch him, succeed and do things right. So the person who would stop him from cooking meth is like kind of frustrating, right? You can imagine from an audience, but in real life, you would really like that person. You would not like the meth empire guy who
No,
murders people.
I'm the one
Um,
who knocks. You would not knock on it. You would not
oh
hope he
yeah,
would not knock on your door.
that's a
But yeah,
great scene. I have to
yeah,
watch that again.
it's a
Um,
great one. But I agree. I think it's It's not right now. It used to be like save a cat, like do something morally good, and then you can have your character do whatever you want, and we have like this anchor of knowing that they're good. I think that used to kind of be the Hollywood way, and that we've evolved into something that accomplishes a similar goal. Like it does something similar, but it's adapted for like modern audiences, which is they don't have to do something morally good, but you have to understand where they're coming from. So like we might see that, this character was bullied their whole life. We might see that this person's like, I think at the beginning of Promising Young Woman, which has a protagonist who is trying to kill somebody. So that's not inherently likable. Within the first 10 minutes, we understand that like she's lost a friend, like that this has been a problem, like that she's like been dealing with this in the best way that she can, and we understand where she's coming from and her perspective, her point of view. And then we're kind of like, you know what? Okay, let's go along for this ride and let's root for her, and let's see her do something that people would probably say is bad.
She has
It's
a motivation that makes sense, right? Like, we understand
yeah.
that motivation. I think that, like, where a lot of that advice comes from is from characters who aren't motivated, right? If you had a character, like in Promising One Young Woman, if you had left that backstory out and just had somebody like, "Oh,
Mhm.
I'm gonna go murder people," that I don't think that would have hit the same way. Like, I think you need that motivation regardless of whether your character is morally good or morally gray or morally terrible.
So just to reiterate my understanding, because this is kind of interesting. So like you can establish empathy a few ways. One, make them likable, like have them do something that we would be like, oh, that's a person worth following. Or you could show a character's pain and discomfort. You could show a character going through something so we understand their inner thoughts and their inner pain, right? And I feel like that's the more common, the more modern approach
Yeah.
that I've seen. I wonder if there are other ways. I'm just kind of
We like
thinking
damage,
about that.
we like
Yeah,
mess. I think people are, especially with the, advent of reality TV, people are really accustomed to liking to watch people do messy things. And that's become more humanizing than saving a cat.
Yeah, I would agree. And I'm trying to think back to like our TV shows because, in a feature, you see this at the very beginning with whoever your protagonist is. You see them either like suffering a lot, you see them being nice to people, you see what they care about. I guess that's the other one is you can also see what they care about and like really understand like what their passion is. And I'd say that that is the case in Abbott Elementary is that when we
right.
meet Janine, we see that she's truly passionate about helping kids. And you could kind of say that that's more like Save the Cat, but it's not a specific action. It's more like we're revealing her philosophy on life is that we understand that she's like this optimistic person who really really cares about helping kids. Um and so in a feature you do that right away with the protagonist, but in TV shows a lot of times even if you get like the smallest snippet of a character, you meet them in a situation that is not neutral, that like really paints them strongly um in one of those ways, like showing what they care about, showing what their damage is, or showing them do something good or something bad. I would say that, there's the opposite of Save the Cat, of like kill the cat for the bad guy. Kind of like if you make this
Right.
person suck, then now we'll just hate them no matter what, whatever they do. Um,
You just come up with that? Kill the cat? 'Cause that's
yeah.
pretty good. That's pretty good.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. So, yeah, I think, it's I think it's just it shows up in every medium, whether
So do
you
you
have
think oh, sorry, you go.
no, 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 you're good.
So do you think that there's like been like maybe like it's like a cultural shift from aspiring to heroes to relating to someone like me?
Yeah, I mean, so
It's kind of interesting.
I've talked about this a couple times because I think it's so interesting, but like you can study the arcs of like what kinds of stories are important in what kinds of societies. And one trend that I'll never forget from my history days in college was that civilizations or societies that have like a collective feeling that they're going to be facing some sort of existential crisis, like, like new
Ragnarok.
people. Yeah, Ragnarok. People moving in, like, I mean, like literal, like they can feel that their society is being threatened. Um, start telling stories about the apocalypse and the end of times. So it's kind of interesting because you look at what American Hollywood was doing, particularly like 10 years ago, where it felt like Hollywood and young adult books were just constantly about these dystopian futures. And that was the kind of that was the undercurrent, like this the collective conscious that all these storytellers were tapping into, was these feelings of fear and uncertainty about the future. And so we were creating tons of material that was like, what if it gets so much worse? What if like all these kids have to fight to the death to feed their families? Like, all these things. And so I would say that in that sense, the same way that superheroes kind of rose out of like World War II or whatever, World War I, World War II, I think that this kind of not completely good, like morally gray protagonist who usually is somehow sticking it to people in power through maybe objectionable methods has like risen lately. I don't know if that makes sense. That's just
Yeah, yeah, we're living in a world of late stage capitalism, like, that makes total sense.
yeah, and so, like, I see that a lot. It's like people are doing kinda, like, questionable things, but we keep rooting for them because it's sticking it to people in power or who, like, who have, like, had power, held power for a long time, like in Promising Young Woman. So, that's I don't know, that was very philosophy, but,
Oh, and listen,
um
what is this but not philosophical, right? The
yeah.
act of writing stories and putting your experience into something, brings up the question of why we are the way we are and why aren't we the way we aren't. Um, I have a question. So we talked about, characteristics of of protagonists, and kind of like they have objectives and they do things, and those things should matter, and that's the story. So, what do you both think? Why do you think that protagonists have to change, or that people say that in at least films and novels?
I feel so strongly about this because I do not enjoy a story where the protagonist does not change. Like, for me, that 180 flip is incredibly satisfying, and I think it's also, like, aspirational and like, "Oh, look, people can change." Partially, I think it's that. I think it's, like, this hope of, like, "Oh, yeah, we're not all stuck in this, like, inevitable doom kind of thing." But I also think that it is satisfying and it is intentional to watch a character change. That is the story. Like, the story is a character who is flawed, who undergoes a journey and leaves change. That's the hero's journey. Um, and I think that that is really the basis of a story. And without that, if a character did not change, I think a lot of the audience members would leave a film thinking, "Why did I watch that?" And I have left films where I've thought, "Okay, I don't get it because I didn't get that catharsis moment. I didn't get that change." And I think part of that is media literacy and being conditioned to want to experience that. For me, that's what it is. I know when I go into a theater, if I don't get some kind of change, I will be disappointed. It's ingrained into my body and soul. I can't help it. Um, so I think that's a really big part of it.
I would agree, and I think the word that you said, catharsis, is like the core of why I think psychologically we need it. And so catharsis, like the definition of it is basically that you're getting like a strong feeling of relief from a like release of you're getting like relief from strong emotions or from strong tension or from like your repressed emotions or things like that. So it's like this release of tension in a way that feels like euphoric. Like in a movie, like when you feel that, it's actually like all these like endorphins and like, it's like a chemical thing happening where you actually physically feel like, yes, triumph, and I think that in order to psychologically create that experience, you have to create tension that you're then going to resolve. And a lot of times what that is it comes in the form of a character flaw where you see somebody really, really struggling with this aspect of themselves, and it creates tension in the viewer. They know that the person needs to change. We see why it's causing all these problems for them. We see why it's messing up their life, and we're like, "God, you need to fix it." And you create enough tension and stress that when they finally overcome it, you get that chemical euphoria of catharsis where you're like, "Oh my god, they overcame it." And even better if it's in an unexpected way. So I would say like psychologically that's why I think it matters more than just like an arbitrary story rule. I think it's about the experience that you're trying to create in an audience. Um, and like when you can create that catharsis moment, that's when stories really stick with people and like takes them on like a very physical, emotional journey. But Adam, I'm curious what you think. I'm gonna bounce it
Oh,
back to you.
I mean, I agree that change and transformation is like the feeling of satisfaction of stories, right? Like, and I think the most effective and tried and true way to achieve that is through the eyes of the person that we are following, right? And whether it's a great novel or a great movie, um, I think that it is, I think 98% of great stories feature the protagonist transforming their own life or the way they see the world or in the way they are, right? I think that there are some exceptions, but there it's not that, oh, nothing changes, nothing changes. It's the world fundamentally changes on a philosophical deep way, right? Like, and the example that I always bring up is Paddington 2, right? Like, Paddington doesn't really have a character arc. He is always good and pure and gives people the benefit of the doubt and he doesn't really change. But the world he's in that movie is unjust and doesn't live by the way he sees the world. And then by the end of the story, it is fundamentally transformed by him. His beliefs are what everyone believes, right? And what was corrupt before is now wonderful, and there's empathy everywhere, right? Like, it's not a story of where there isn't transformation. They make up for the fact that the character doesn't change by changing everyone else. Like, every side character has a character arc, and it's not just an irrelevant character arc. It's Paddington's philosophical worldview comes to life in every single character in the story, right? Now, do I think that that's I don't think that's I don't recommend people doing stuff like that, like especially for your first story. Like, you should
So much
be
harder.
it's really hard, and it has like to the conditions that have to be set for that type of story to work are like really there's a lot. Like, it's hard. And I also think it helped that that was an existing IP and a sequel, and that they were willing to do that. I can think of a few other examples, but like at the end of the day, what we're talking about, change, transformation, that is still the thing. Like, if you are not having huge change and transformation on like a philosophical level happening in the world of your story and with the characters and their consciousness, no, people are going to leave feeling pissed off. They're going to read your stuff and not like it, you know. Because at the end of the day, what's the promise to the reader? That you're going to learn something, that you're going to experience something. And if they walk away and none of the characters have learned or experienced or changed or anything, or if the world hasn't felt like the world of the story didn't feel like it changed throughout the course of the story, it was like, why did I sit here? Like, what was the thing I got out of this? Like, I didn't see us go from point A to point B emotionally. We just stayed at point A, you know,
Yeah,
and that's not fun. Um,
It's
I would
depressing.
agree.
it is
Yeah.
depressing.
And this is another fun kind of like a thought about stories that work. Brandon says we need the story to do something in our lives, maybe shine insight on something we don't completely understand.
Yeah.
We must elicit emotion. And I would definitely agree with that. I mean, like there's in addition to the character changing, we care about the themes that are being explored, right? Like it's kind of comes back to like which themes really, really mean something to the writer. And that was like something that Theo was saying before is that, like you put yourself into your writing always. And it's not necessarily that like if you're somebody who has lived your whole life in suburbia and is like, had a completely average nuclear family, completely average school, completely average college, you're working a completely average office job. It doesn't mean that you have to write a story about somebody who has lived your exact those exact like outward experiences. What it means is that you're going to like lean into the feelings, like the spectrum of emotions and emotional experiences that you have had in order to make the characters' experiences and emotions and inner journeys more grounded. So like you might not have been, I don't know, a like a space marine flying around, right? But you might have experienced something like where you really had to like leave home for a bit and go do something that felt risky or like felt like where you felt a lot of pressure. You know, you can tie to these emotional experiences that you have had and pull those forward. And, you know, not a lot of people have been space marines. I dare say
I
none.
don't think a single one.
I don't
Is
think
it
there's a single person who's been a space marine.
isn't Marines the Navy?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
It's just I think that, like, this Warhammer thing that Carl
No.
plays has a lot of space marines.
Oh,
So,
no.
anyway, you know, nobody's been a space marine, but you still capture, like, the themes and the feelings and the emotions that you've experienced and that your audience has experienced to build something that, on some level, is relatable. Um, anyway.
And people will relate to it. If you put yourself in there and you put your real experiences in there or an interpretation of your experiences, people will really relate to it. And if you think of all of the great films that you've seen, if you look at the writers and you look at the directors and look at the experiences and talk and listen to them speak about why they wrote what they wrote, like you'll see how they did that. And that's probably a really good idea to do is um in my time, we used to have special features on the DVD. I'm sure they do YouTube videos now, where people talk about that kind of stuff, and I think it's really valuable to know what people took from their experience and infused into making something completely new. Like, when I think about, Alexie, your comparison of someone who lived a completely nuclear life, someone like that could write The Truman Show, like.
Yeah, that's true. And by the way, I had to look it up. People in the Space Force are called Guardians. So we've not had Space Marines, but we have had Space Guardians. So
Is that real?
yeah, it's real.
That's such a bad name. They need to rebrand that.
Space I don't know
Space
what I would call.
Guardians.
I don't know what I would.
I am not the person to brand that stuff.
Yeah, there's a reason I have moved out of copywriting. I am not. But yeah, so you know, I know that we got to go down this like really in like this. I love thinking about character and protagonists and kind of like why stories work psychologically and emotionally and all these things. Um, but I want to bring it back a little bit to writing the feature and writing the pilot. So these kinds of like, if this is interesting to you, like really trying to like break apart why story works, I think that you'll find something that you enjoy, and that, you know, gives you a feeling of like not quite catharsis, but you know, just gives you some
I think it does.
excitement. Yeah, you know, like when things start making sense, I guess there is like a tension that you feel when it's like, I don't understand why this story works. And then when you like break it down and analyze it and understand kind of why these pieces fit together in the way that they do, there's like a catharsis there. And so if you enjoy this kind of thinking, then I think that you would really get a lot out of writing the feature and writing the pilot. Um,
And our
and
community. You know,
yeah,
this is the kind of
That's
stuff
right.
that we do all of the time, and I think that's a really valuable part of what the courses have to offer. It's not just, these really phenomenal courses, I can say because I've taken them, um, that really break this through, but we are regularly having these discussions. We're regularly having labs where we talk about these kinds of things and we work through this because we're not just teaching, we're also writers. We're going through this ourselves. We understand. Um, we get you.
And
mhm.
if writing the feature and writing the pilot is too expensive at this particular time and you're interested, it will obviously be on promotion in the future and is always available. But we also have two free courses, writing the scene and writing the short. Writing the short and writing the scene both feature John Warren and ourselves, and writing the scene And writing the short is everything you kind of really need to know to write a short story, write a short film. And writing the scene is everything you need to know to write like a scene for anything, but also specifically screenwriting. It goes through the craft of scene writing, the technicalities. If you've never written screenplays before, but it has advanced material and beginner material in it, so it has something for everybody.
I would agree with that. And then, so a question that we get asked a lot is like, is this for me? Like, is this the right course for me? And I think that in general, we do go pretty deep into concepts in like theory in these, but we do our best to help people like ramp up to those moments. So if you're completely new to story, I would really recommend starting with writing the short and just getting kind of like an overview of like what are like the mechanics and the words that we use. And writing the short is a very fast course. I think you could probably knock it out in a weekend and just kind of understand like what's a protagonist, what's an objective, what's a midpoint, what are all these different pieces. And then even though I would definitely say that we get into intermediate or advanced concepts in the courses, I'd like to think that we do it in a way that builds up to it. So we're not just kind of throwing you in the deep end without any help. So I mean, we've had writers who are brand new, never tried this before, maybe have come from a different creative writing field or are just deciding that they want to try writing for the first time. We've had students like that. We also have students who are active writers in writers' rooms, producers, people who are making work and have made work, like produced work, in the
So
courses
drop by
as
the
well.
Discord if
Yeah.
you want to chat with us also. So we have a lot of call to actions here. We got the free courses, we've got the really engaging and deep paid courses, we have the community in the Discord, and also YouTube videos. Every Friday we do a live stream. Got a lot.
Absolutely. Cool. So I think that is it for today, but I hope that this was helpful and maybe inspired you to check out some of the stuff that we have going on. All of the links to this, including like our courses, our Discord, stuff like that, I've included in the description here. So you should be able to link there. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
We will be doing a Q&A in one moment, by the way. Q&A. Woohoo.
Hello.
So Discord, I have a link to that in the description, but basically if you aren't familiar with Discord, it's kind of like Slack that was made for gamers but has become more. So it's like a more casual Slack, basically.
Microsoft owns it.
Yeah. It's like a little like chat room forum thing. And basically we hang out there all the time. People post their work, ask questions. We do workshops. Theo does every Sunday morning at the crack of dawn, 10 a.m.
It's not that early.
Theo hosts a write-in. You can talk. You should probably say stuff.
Yeah. So we take 2 kind of 25-minute writer sprints. We talk a little bit before and in between each sprint about what everybody's goals are, and if there are any, anything anyone's struggling with that they're looking to get a little bit of feedback on, so that we can get that writing done. And everybody who has taken part has gotten a ton of writing done. I've gotten a lot of writing done, so it's a really good time. 10 a.m. is not that early, I promise.
The crack of dawn.
10 a.m. Eastern time.
Eastern time.
Yeah.
Eastern. Yeah, all of our times we give them in Eastern. So just as a heads up. And then on Thursdays, we also have a live workshop that I run at 5:30 on the Discord, where basically every week we will table read 3 to 5 pages of your script. We alternate between you can bring whatever you want days and kind of challenge days where we've given you a prompt the week before and you bring in a 3 to 5 page scene or short, whatever it is, and we read it aloud on the spot and we give some quick notes, like a live little workshop. And both of these things are totally free, by the way. Our Discord stuff is free. So we would love to see you there. or on Friday. And on Friday, fun fact, we have a very special guest coming who I'm super excited about, Victoria Mail. So we're going to be sending out more information about that soon, but she is an awesome writer who has been was a finalist in Nichols and is doing lots of really cool stuff. And we're going to be talking about the reverse engineering your own IP. So the idea is that like it's really, really hard to sell original stuff right now. It's just that's kind of the state of Hollywood in particular. It's really hard to sell original stuff. You have much better luck if you are building on existing IP that has some sort of baked-in audience. And so, how do you do that? Well, one way is to reverse engineer it. You can write and publish short stories, and then write a script that is adapted from that. So and she did it backwards, which I think was really fun. She wrote a script and wanted to take it out and was having a hard time because people want it to be based on something that gives them a more sure bet. And so she said, "You know what? Fine." And wrote some short stories, got them published, and then now people are like, "Oh, cool. Let's take that call. Let's look at your script." So that's kind of what we're talking about on Friday. Um sorry, that was a ramble. But
No, it's good.
I think I saw another. I thought this was funny. Dan Ree said, "I always thought likable meant not insufferable to be around 24/7." I think that's true, but also like some of my favorite characters over the years have been pretty freaking insufferable.
The best. The best. Clark, come on.
Oh my
You wanna
god,
be around that girl?
from the 100, she sucked, but I loved her.
Exactly. That's
It
the
took
sweet spot. How do you write someone who sucks but people love them? The
Yeah, I
key.
mean she was determined to keeping her people going and keeping her people alive. Same with
Characters who are fun to watch are very different than people you would like to hang out with.
The
Yeah.
girl who would press the button that would murder dozens of people. That's the girl.
Yeah, you gotta do it. And I also I was thinking about Malcolm in the Middle the other day because I saw stuff about Frankie Muniz, and I was like, Malcolm in the Middle was so annoying, and I loved that show so much. Like it was God, that was like one of my faves back in the day. But he's another one who I feel like it would be insufferable to hang out around this character, but I will watch him all day long. Um And I think so and then Brandon mentioned I love copywriting. Um, I think all of us have done copywriting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was a copywriter for Scholastic for like the book company for 7 years. Um, Adam does copywriting stuff. Theo, you've done it too, right?
Oh, I've
You
done
were
I've done a copywriting.
Yeah.
I did. I had a copywriter job in like 2017, but no longer.
Gotcha.
I was
Je le
not good at it.
déteste.
What'd you say, Theo?
I said I dislike. I don't. You know what? I don't dislike it. I find that it takes up creative space from my brain, and I need it.
I had the same experience.
Yeah, I used to think that it was different enough that I would that it would be okay. And I realized that it's not necessarily that it matters that if it's similar or not, because it is very different. It's just kind of like how much creative energy can you output in a day? And if you're trying to copyright well,
Yep.
that is a lot of creative energy, even if it's a completely different side. So it's not so yeah, I agree with that. I am glad I don't copyright anymore, but it was helpful for like
It's a
learning how
great
to write
skill.
short. Yeah, writing like really succinct stuff and like really being aware of your audience, and it was a really helpful experience for screenwriting. What are your thoughts on foil characters? Like them, hate them, or indifferent?
I think they're very important in terms of functionality, and the benefits of that are too significant to ignore, right? Like, I mean, how else do you make a character seem a certain way than to have a character that contrasts them, right?
Mhm.
Like the larger than life, hilarious, character, like the Jack Sparrows of the world are only as good as the Will Turners of the world are dull,
Yeah,
right?
are there
Exactly.
straight men? The funny
Right, yeah,
people are only
exactly.
as good as their straight men, right?
That's right. That's right. Sorry, that was a very specific Pirates of the Caribbean reference.
Great reference.
But
What do
same
you
as a
think,
a
Theo?
good protagonist antagonist combo, like
Mhm.
you need the contrast. The contrast is what makes it, I think.
I agree. And then
Yeah.
this is actually something that we talk about a lot in writing the feature, and we still get into it in writing the pilot. But, you know, the kind of approach to story that we talk about is that this is very technical, but I'll try to do it fast. That like your thematic question is a question about the world that all the characters have different answers to. And that's kind of how you incorporate theme
Mm.
into your story. And so at the very beginning of the protagonist's journey, their answer to that thematic question is their flaw. So the classic example that we use a lot because I think it helps people understand is the thematic question might be, what is the meaning of family? And in the very beginning, the character's flaw means that they answer the question by saying like family is blood and nothing else, and like you owe everything to your blood. And then over the course of the story, their answer to that changes to maybe be like, family is the people that you choose. Typically, you'll have a mentor character who has that answer, the answer that the protagonist is eventually going to adopt, or like a very similar one. And you'll have an antagonist who who either like has like a worse version of their flaw, like, instead of being like family is your blood, they'll be like family is your blood and everyone else can die. Like, that kind of a thing. So in a way like that's a way to make a foil that isn't necessarily just based on, oh, this is going to be the opposite of my protagonist, but is
Hmm.
more about what they actually believe and making sure that it creates a relationship not just to the protagonist, like it's not just a foil of the protagonist, it's somebody who happens to contrast with where the protagonist is going, but also has relationships of their own to the world. Like they don't just exist to oppose the protagonist, they exist in their own right as well. A little bit of a ramble, but hopefully that
Manic
makes sense.
pixie dream foil.
Manic pixie dream foil.
I love it. Well,
Cool.
I have to
That's
go,
all I got.
unfortunately.
I'm sorry.
I think that's it. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. And we hope to see you Friday. And again, both of the courses right now are at 25% off until April 15th. And the links in the video description here will automatically input that coupon code, which is spring24. So, yep. Thank you so much.
Have a good one, everyone.
Adios.
Bye-bye.